When half the shell's ripped off on a Game Boy you're trying to fix, it's a bit of a red flag, isn't it? Hi and welcome back to the shed. Well, at the start of this video I did record a whole intro and now I've gone back to do the editing. It turns out that I didn't press record, so here I am introducing a video that I have already recorded, which isn't my usual style. Anyway, this is the shell from a Game Boy Advance that I've got that had not worked for, for as long as I've owned it. I got it in a bundle of bits and pieces of DS Lite parts, I think, a long time ago, and I never got it working. However, as I have got some new parts for doing a new build with a Game Boy Advance IPS laminated screen, which I'm really excited about doing, I needed a donor Game Boy. So I dug this one out, I took it apart, I had some new capacitors to try and replace the old ones and see if that would bring it back to life. And anyway, take a look at the video and see how I got on. So this is our starting point, Game Boy Advance console. I don't think I've ever had it working. I think I got it as a bundle with a load of other DS Lite parts and things. It's for some reason got this back corner absolutely ripped off it. I don't know whether that was for some other project or what. It's not currently screwed together. That will lift off. The inside, the motherboard doesn't look that bad. There's a bit of some sort of scorch mark or something here that could be an issue. But we'll see what we can do. And if we can get some signs of life out of it, it doesn't even matter how good the screen or buttons are, because I've bought a new kit. But the main thing is, can we get it to power up? If we manage to get it to power up, can we get all the buttons responding? Can we get it running games? So first things first, this is a bit of a lost cause. I do have this shell, which came off the last project I did when I did my purple Game Boy Advance, that clear purple one with the TFT screen. That was awesome. I'll try and remember to link that one for you to have a look at. But I do have the shell from that one, so I'll be able to borrow this back shell. I do have a spare original screen if I end up needing it, but in the first instance this will be able to go back on. So I'll put the trigger buttons on here. I'll put the back of the shell in place, and now we've got something that will hopefully, let's just wiggle that button, resemble a bit more of a console. I can't get to the switch because I haven't got the power switch bit in there. I've got one of those knocking about somewhere, but in the meantime I've got a toothpick that I can reach in with. First thing to try out is some batteries. So I've got a fresh pair of AAAs. Let's just make sure we get those in the right way around, and for our first job, just see if we can reach in there and power on the switch. And unsurprisingly, nothing is happening at all. Switch off, switch on, and we're getting nothing. Right, okay, so if I take those batteries out again, notice I'm not devastated about that because I think I tested it a while ago anyway. So if I take off that back cover, so what we have got on this board is 1, 2, 3, 4 capacitors, and what I've bought from ZedLabz is a replacement set of capacitors from them. So I'm going to open that up and I'm going to have a go at replacing those if I can. So these bags are resealable, so you can just cut off the top, and then the bag is reusable in future and doesn't necessarily need throwing out. Or if this fix doesn't work, I'll be able to put these back into the bag for another attempt. So it's quite easy to work out which one's which because they've got all the values on there. These two are the same, and then there's one slightly bigger and one bigger still, so we'll be able to get those removed. Normally I would remove it from the shell because I wouldn't want to damage the shell, but in this case the shell's not that much of an issue because that'll be being replaced anyway. These are surface mounted capacitors. It means that the legs don't go through the holes, they sit on top. If I get this biggest one out, you'll see it's got like the two legs are sort of folded out, so they'll sit flat and get soldered to the surface. There's two ways to remove these, either with a soldering iron, just holding the heat and levering it up, or using a heat gun, which is what I'm going to do, like a rework station. Now I don't want to ruin the other components as I'm removing these, so I'm going to put some Kapton tape over those. That's like a heat proof, well, very heat resistant tape, so I can just stick that in place over these other components so that I don't end up applying too much heat to the bits where I don't want to apply heat. Right, I've got that in a bracket so it can be held a bit more securely. I think the airflow might go that way a little bit, so I'll get a bit of tape over that small capacitor that's behind it. The tape doesn't need to be like mega stuck down, it just needs to be covering up any bits that I don't want to heat. Right, so I've got my heat gun, I'll set that up. I'll set the airflow fairly low and the temperature quite high, so I don't want to be like blasting all over the board. Yeah, that's hot. Lift it off there. I'll swap sides. Okay, so that's the next one with the surrounding areas masked off. That's off there, and another. And the last one's over on the other side. So before I put the new ones on, I'm just going to chuck a load of flux on each point where it's going to be soldered. I'm going to reflow the solder on the points. I'm going to put flux on the contacts on the bottom of the capacitors as well, and then hopefully I'll be able to just lay them in place, reheat the solder, and they will be secured in position. So I could do it with the gun again and just put the solder on, or put solder paste on and reflow it. But I think what I'd like to do is make sure there is definitely solder on each contact point, and then just put the capacitor in position and reheat and solder. Okay, so I've rotated a bit here so my soldering iron can be on an angle like this, and just reflow the solder that's on there, get that nice and shiny, and on the other pad there too, add a bit of new solder, that's fresh there. Get my capacitor. There's a shape that's printed on the PCB, so you know there's the flat side and the side with the little bevels. There we go, like that. So that has to go that way around because the capacitor has a positive and negative terminal. Right, let's see if I can hold this steady. So if I melt it, place the capacitor on top, hold it, and then I will try and get the pressure on with the tweezers and just melt and reflow the other side, make sure that attaches. Again, get in position on this side and make sure that it's flowed enough to attach the other pin in place. Wait for it to set before giving it a little wiggle. That seems secure. What I'll do is just get a tiny extra bit of solder on the end of my iron. That was worth it, bit of pressure on top. And again, just clean the tip of my iron. Tiny bit of solder on it. Get in position. Reheat, make sure pressure's applied. And we're in business. So we'll do the same with the other ones. So the alternative to using the tweezers is you can use your fingers, but obviously do that at your own risk, because you might burn your fingers if you're not careful. So easier to reheat and melt the solder first, then put the component in place. That's not secured, but it's enough to just have it in position. Again, a little bit of extra solder on the iron does help, so I'll put some on there. Get myself in position, reflow that, keep the heat on for a while. So it does get hot under your fingertip, but it just does give you that much more control compared to the tweezers. So, you know, it's just one of those things. You try it. If you feel it's getting warm, just use your common sense and get your fingers out of the way. Right. Let's try and find a decent angle to come in at with this. Reheat, pressure on. That seems nice and solid. Right, next one. Be particularly careful when you're moving the soldering iron away. You don't want to like lift it up and catch your finger. Right, those are both feeling solid. Right, so we've got one more to do. Melt the solder before placing the component down. Just makes it a little easier to put in place. Needs moving over a little. Better. And the thing is just to be patient. Once you've melted the solder and you've maybe don't press too hard. Oh god, right, luckily yeah, don't do that. I mean I should have taken it out of the case and then I would have had a better grip with the bracket. Luckily, as it stands, it was secured in position there, so not too bad. But yeah, I could have done without that. Will I include that in the edit? Probably. We all make mistakes. It's fine. It's all part of the fun. Right. So I'll clean my tip. To do that, by the way, I've got this little tip cleaner. It's got loads of little brass shavings in. You just jab the end of your soldering iron in it, and it cleans it all up and distributes the solder nicely over the tip. So yeah, it's well worth having. Right, so just this last connector to do now. So I'll add a bit more solder onto my iron, get myself in position, maybe support it from the bottom this time as I apply the pressure, reheat, reflow all that solder, and hopefully that's enough to secure it in position. I think it might need a little bit more. Yeah, much better supporting it from the bottom this time. Gotcha, you are an idiot. You're supposed to be making these videos showing people how to do things. Well, I suppose that's the thing with my videos, isn't it? A lot of the time I'm not really showing you how, I'm just fumbling my way through a project and you get to come along for the ride, so it doesn't always go how I planned. And that's part of the fun. So currently leave the switch to off, get the back shell on, pop the batteries in, and see if we get any signs of life. We're going in, switching on. Oh yeah! Okay, I really wasn't expecting that to work, so I am thrilled. Obviously it's gone a little bit glitchy because I'm just holding it together and it's got all these bits missing. But that did seem to sort it. Okay, so now it's tested and there's some signs of life. What I'm planning to do is transplant the whole thing into this black shell. I may as well swap the screen, seeing as that one's stuck in place anyway. I'll include all the bits like the shoulder buttons and these strips that go down the sides, and I'll find a power switch as well. And then if it powers up and everything works smoothly, great. If it doesn't, we'll try and work out what those issues are, and then we're all done for now, and I've got a donor ready to use for my next project. Right, so let's get this old shell out of the way. So we'll take off the back. Although you've got the tri-wing screws on the outside shell of a Game Boy Advance, on the inside you've just got regular crosshead screws, so we'll take those out. You've usually got 2 or 3, it depends on, sometimes there's one in there, sometimes there's not. In this case, I've just got 2. So that should just lift out, so I can take out my screen ribbon. I've just noticed there that this isn't actually clipped in place, so when I tested it with the battery the screen was a bit flickery. That will probably be why, so that is very encouraging. Right, so I've got my motherboard out of there now. That's got the A and B button silicon attached. Everything else is currently in the case here, so I'll just swap over to the black one. Get my D-pad out of there. It's a bit dirty, but no matter, we'll end up with all brand new parts in this sooner or later. So we'll get the silicon parts in place. Get the A and B button and the little LED light tube thingy for the power LED. A and B in place. And then we'll get the motherboard in. So you've got to get the speaker lined up there mainly. Once that's in place, everything else can kind of drop in position fairly easily. I'm just going to make sure that the screen ribbon is on the outside. There we go, and that just drops in place. I can get the screen ribbon in place here, and this time I will fasten the tops. Just got to make sure I'm lined up correctly, and with that in place I'll just pull these 2 little tabs down. So what these do, like where that ribbon's just gone in, it slots in really easily, and then it locks by pushing these little tabs down. So that was not quite down there. There you go, that's pushed down now. What that means is that you don't put any strain on the ribbon by trying to push it in, which is what you have to do on the original Game Boy, which is a bit of a pain. Right, so we've got those 2 screws to go back in. Fortunately, from other recent builds on my tray at the top of my silicon mat here, you can see I've got loads of spare bits and bobs and screws and buttons and things, so I should be able to pull together what I need. So we've got like these bits. I've got 2, 1 for each side. That one goes there because it's got like the little bump, and then that one sits in there. Then I've got the shoulder buttons, L and R. So you put because you've got the screen facing away from you, it always confuses me a bit, but you get the right on the left and the left on the right. Drop those in position, and then we'll get the back on. Oh, We need a power switch. Have I got a power switch anywhere? I think, yeah, that's the right part. So that'll drop in there, set it to the off position. I think that's everything I need now, so I'll drop that in there. And now I've got to try and find the right screws. Right, I think I've found enough of the right screws for going in there. So I'll just pop those in. And then we'll test it out. And I'm pretty confident now that it should work fine. This is a Game Boy Advance I have had sitting in a box for a long time. So much so I'd forgotten all about it until I was rummaging around and looking for something else, and then I just brought it out and put it to one side because I remembered a little while ago I had bought the capacitor set from ZedLabz. Really, really handy that they sell stuff like that, not just like the general kits and buttons and things, but replacement parts, so you can be in the business of just repairing and restoring things rather than buying new flashy upgrades like screens and buttons and things. And there are suppliers now who will sell exactly the parts you need. So instead of having to do all of the research and trying to find out exactly which capacitor you need and what values and what types, what they do at ZedLabz is they will do all that hard work for you, put together a little kit. So all you need to do is get yourself sorted with the right bag of bits, order it from them, they'll send it, and then you can replace all those parts in your console and get it up and running again, which is awesome, isn't it? Right, okay, I think it's a smaller screw that goes in here. I could be wrong, but I'll just pop this one in place there. It is gripping, so a shorter one is fine. Again, we'll put the batteries in. And get that cover on there. And we're on. And because the ribbon is now seated properly, I know it's not a backlit screen, but you can see there. Right, so it's time for doing a quick test. So let's just grab a cartridge and slot it in and switch on and hope for the best. It's just, I am so pleased that it's actually booting up at all. Here's our game. So Street Fighter 2 Turbo Revival is a good one for testing. I'll try and hold at a decent angle so that you can see the screen. Mainly with this one, obviously we've got the sound, but if you go on the training and then just choose any character, doesn't matter. What I can do is down and up, left and right we're working. We'll go on normal, and obviously the sound is working, so I'll just turn that down a little bit. So what I can do is I can check my right, left, down, up. This one also has the shoulder buttons, so you can check with those two. So kick's both working and punch A and B is working, so all those buttons are fine. And then with the sound up on this game, when you press select, you get the little sound and start pauses it. So there we go, everything is working. Honestly, I'm thrilled, but I'm really surprised to have got that all up and running. I've got a fully working Game Boy Advance console. Right, well, there are some projects that I usually expect to work, some that I hope will work, and some that I just do anyway, even though I know it won't work. And this really felt like one of the latter. I mean, look at the state of that shell. This is how I got it, by the way. I didn't hack that apart. So goodness knows what was going on with that. It has never worked since I owned it. And now here we are, fully functioning, and it was just handy to have the shell sitting on the desk from a previous project I'd done, managed to pull the spare bits together. I know that's not always easy for most people, but generally, like, just replacing those capacitors. Capacitors are a component that has a bit of a limited lifespan, and you know, on this console, if I look on the back of the shell, get my glasses on, it's like copyright 2000 Nintendo, so we are looking at something that is 22 years old. So those capacitors are going to be at least 22 years old. So it's fair enough that these will start to die off after a while. Now I've got a fresh set. It looks like this motherboard will have about another 22 years at least in it. And yeah, I should have more faith in myself, but you know, you saw how clumsy I am with these things. And replacing capacitors, just on a serious note, it's one thing like where I knocked it off and so on, but when you're removing them you've got to be really gentle with that leverage. I didn't mention it when I was going through and actually removing them, but you've got to make sure the solder is melted and just ease it off gently. If you pull even slightly too hard, you can rip the contacts off the motherboard, and if you do that, it's either a very, very difficult job to try and get the capacitor reconnected, or you've just killed the motherboard. So that is something to really, really be careful with. Everything else, if you follow what I did, it should work out pretty well. And hopefully if you've got one of these that doesn't work, or another Game Boy console that doesn't work, and you get yourself one of these capacitor kits like the ones that ZedLabz sell, hopefully it will bring your console back to life as well. So anyway, as I mentioned at the start of the video, I have got parts for doing an IPS upgrade. I'm going to do it on this very console. I've got a new shell, I've got new buttons, it's going to be a new video, it's going to be awesome. So I'll see you then. In the meantime, leave a like, leave a comment, and please subscribe if you want to see more like this. It is always much appreciated. And I'll see you for the upgrade. Bye.